Welcome along to the big debate. It's 11:20 now. Many people work very hard to make it to the corporate world, but my next guest, well, he did that and then he gave it all up to pursue his passion for poetry. London-based Ghalib Lawn is now a full-time poet and spoken word artist. So good, in fact, that last year he was a finalist at New York's Poetry Slam, and he's about to release a short film on the piece of work that he performed there. Ghalib, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming in.
Ankur, thank you for having me.
First of all, I've got to say, I've listened to some of you and I thought to myself, your voice would be a great soundtrack for something very soothing. I don't know, something, I could hear it on an advert or I could hear it on a cinematic screen. So I'm glad I can sort of put a voice to the face and the name now. So.
That's very kind. If Attenborough retires, and I hope you can be my reference point.
100%. I'll put a word in if I can for the great man. It's an interesting path that you've taken. I mentioned it just now. Just tell us about your journey, what you were doing before, and then was there a eureka moment when you thought, actually, no, this is where I should be heading?
Yeah, there definitely was. So to give you a brief overview of where I was, last year I came back to London after living abroad in the UAE for the last 4 years. Working in the corporate law sphere. And in that time, I had the opportunity to have a tax-free salary, living on the face of it, a much better life than I could have ever dreamed of. And in that time, I was still performing my poetry at various events. I was still writing quite a bit. But the one thing that I think hit me throughout that period of time was I felt some degree of being incomplete. And that inadequacy kind of wouldn't go away. The bureaucracy that goes with the corporate world is something where you're naturally channeled to be like almost like a Henry Ford worker in some form or another. And for me, who always enjoyed the idea of expression and be able to express myself in my way and do it on my terms, felt quite stifled in that environment. So long story short, a very, very brief story, if you want me to go into it.
Yeah.
So maybe a few Christmases ago, I was with one of the senior lawyers at work. And he just said to me, he gave me like a breakdown of what his life was like. He just reached 50, he just made it to a very senior place in the firm. And he said, Ghalib, at the age of 30, you're going to spend your 30s trying to make it. You'll be working very, very hard. He goes, by the time you get to 40, then all that money that you've made, he goes, your investments will then try go into that, be it family, properties, whatever. He said, but by the time you get to 50, which is where I'm at now, you're going to ask yourself, was it all worth it? And his joke at Christmas parties, he said, was that I make rich people richer. And he said the sad truth is that's true. So just ask yourself, what do you want to make your life? Is it about giving back to others? Or is it about purely fulfilling your own desires? You make that choice. And that stuck with me. And I always felt that because my writing, I had a human rights background. I worked for the UN for a little while as well. And I was always someone who wanted to give back more. And that was where that sense of consciousness always had that underlining feeling for me that I need to do something that fulfills that.
It's easier said than done, because I can imagine, and I think I know so many people who will continue in a career where, you know, they possibly aren't happy, but they'll continue pursuing it, possibly because their family have always said to them, like, you've got to stay on this straight and narrow path. So, well, how did they react to it, for example? And was it a difficult decision to sort of come to and also sort of convince, you know, family members to say, well, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go from this to this.
There were various reactions from perspective of family. My Ummi and Abu were always very, very supportive of my work. But coming from a working class family, I didn't have it laid out for me. So at the point of saying I'm no longer going to be doing this, economic security for my parents and my family is king. That was seen as equating to success. And here I was saying, I'm going to leave away that sense of stability and now focus purely on something which is artistic form and trying to go into a world where you're not sure how your payment's going to come about, where your salary is going to come from day to day or month to month. And so for my mum and dad, overall, they were very, very supportive. My friends' reactions were almost like, what are you doing? Like, are you sure? Like, the poetry thing, you know, is it like a thing you're doing just right now? And for others who didn't know, I've been writing for a very, very long time, thought it was just more like a fad, which, you know, for spoken word especially, it's a huge boon. So that can be understandable as well.
But where did your passion from poetry stem from then?
Oh, God.
Because I've been told reliably by a member of our team that are you named after the famous poet Mirza Ghalib?
Yeah, so Mirza Ghalib was almost like the equivalent of probably Jay-Z for like the modern generation.
Right, okay.
For 19th century India.
Right.
A person who almost redesigned the way language was perceived, and he was seen and celebrated as arguably the greatest poet of South Asia. So being named after him, perhaps there's an uncanny resemblance.
Yeah.
At the age of about 11, my mother had someone who came and taught me poetry for about 2-3 months.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he passed away soon after, but he left a book for my sister and myself, which was of William Wordsworth. So he used to get us to learn his poetry. And that always stuck with me. And he was an old Sri Lankan man who was an interpreter for the Home Office and just had this deep desire and love to share the power of poetry. And for me as a kid, I was like, this is quite fun. Like words rhyme. Oh, that's quite interesting. But what he taught us, even at that very young age, was it's not about the rhyming. Look at what the words are saying. Look at why he's saying it. And to me, I was always fascinated. I was like, wow, I've got a very curious mind. So as a child, I was like, that's weird. I want to sit down and understand this. And then by the time I was about 17, my grandmother passes away, and my poetry starts to then be about capturing every single key moment in my life. And
So,
sorry.
No, carry on. I just meant to say like small snapshots of your life. You were just detailing.
Exactly. I was detailing, and then it almost got a bit comical. By the time I get to university, I had friends and stuff who were asking me to write for their other halves without them knowing. So to the extent that one person, I wrote for him for when he was proposing, and she never knew.
She does now.
Well, they got divorced, so I can understand why. But I mean, like, it is what it is. But, I think he's happily ever after married now. But yes, I used to then write almost vicariously, where people would tell me their stories.
Wow.
And, one story was about someone who met a girl. It'd been 7 days. So I wrote a poem called 7 Days. And it wasn't the Craig David remix. It was a poem about what that 7 days.
I was thinking, I didn't want to say it.
So, it was something that enabled me to, in various outlets, just express artistic form.
I mean, is it something, do you think, I don't know, possibly within Asian culture, does it get overlooked, literature, poetry? Is it something, because a lot of the time I think our parents all want us to forge careers which are reliable and almost quite predictable, because we know how much of a safe bet that is. Going into something like this, it's a massive gear change and quite a bit of a risk, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think for a lot of British Asians who have coming from migrant families, my parents were born and bred in East Africa, originally from Kashmir, but their parents had all gone on boats from Kashmir and landed in Africa, and that level of diaspora, I think, instilled in them the importance of economic security and making sure that you have a stable income. That is seen as making it. And for me now, as a second-generation migrant in the UK, I was able to do a law degree. I was able to do a master's in law, the first in my family to have had a degree after my brother. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, I've seemed to have been successful. But to me, I didn't feel like that was really what captured who I was. So,
But I admire the fact that you did something about it. I mean, a lot of people would just continue to keep a lid on it and continue on that hamster wheel, continue on that cycle. So that your passion for it really shone through. And what was when was the moment where you thought, actually, I could actually start forging a career in this? When did it start to really become a full-time profession, so to speak?
Sure. So I was performing one night in Dubai, and there were a couple who happened to be watching the audience. Long story short, the guy was a National Geographic videographer, previously was, and wanted to sit down with me and work on a piece. And I didn't know who he was. And suddenly, the next day I wrote the piece. Day after, we were in the recording studios. And Every Story Must Come to an End came about, and I resigned the week after.
Wow.
So
just like that.
So then that was it. Everything just snowballed. I was like, it's time to call it a day. And my Every Story Must Come to an End, which was in itself about a relationship, was also about the idea, the fact that in life, if you want to pursue something, it's on you. And everyone goes through their difficulties. You were saying about doing my passion. I feel lucky that I can do it. It's not easy financially to make headway. But at the same time, I think no matter what you do, so long as you're doing the very best version of yourself or trying to, be it being the best father in the world or being the best milkman, the idea is that so long as you're passionate or you're giving it your best, to me, that goes a long way. And I felt poetry was my medium to express the best aspects of my traits and personality.
Absolutely. So we've got a real treat coming up. We're going to get Ghalib to do one of his pieces for us. Tell us just a little bit about the piece, what it's called. I believe it's New Year, and just tell us a little bit about how it formulated in that mind.
Right. So I wrote it yesterday. So I said to Romani,
I like
I was
that.
like, Romani, I was like, we'll write a piece for the show. And she's like, oh,
Awesome.
great. So I said, all right, I'll put this together. So the idea
Brilliant.
was that for me this year, I was reflecting on New Year's. And often with New Year's, you think about it in terms of, all right, what am I going to do? New Year's resolution, start a gym membership, or, I'm going to go and save the world, whatever. Everyone generally has quite noble goals. And for me this year, I decided I wanted to do something a little bit different, which is to have no resolutions whatsoever. I wanted to turn those resolutions into what habits can I improve upon? And habits in terms of being more grateful, being more kinder, not necessarily having to like go on 4 holidays or the idea of having to achieve something along the lines of those, but purely how can I actually improve myself inside?
Hmm.
Be someone who actually offers more to my family, my loved ones, and to those who I don't even know. So this was basically the idea of let me have an alternative narrative on what New Year's resolutions could mean.
Absolutely, I love that. So you've been listening to Ghalib Loan. He's been talking about his new career, and just tell us where we could find more of your poetry and more of your spoken word as well before before we get into this specially commissioned track for the big debate.
Absolutely. So on Instagram, my handle is Ghalibspoetry, and it's Ghalib with an S, poetry. I'm also, my YouTube channel is Ghalibspoetry, and this time it's after the Ghalib, there's an apostrophe and an S. And because the other Ghalib is basically a lot more famous than me, you'll see loads of like Jinnah hats, or like, no, not Jinnah hats, the Turkish hats.
Yeah.
That's not me. So if you search
He's
a
a lot
little
younger.
deeper, yeah, for about 150 years.
Ghalib, thank you so much for joining us on the big debate. We'll let you take it away with your piece.
This poem is about the new year and what we could do. If you had a dream in 2018 and it didn't come true, hold steadfast and let this be the year of lifting your hopes from the canvas into a picture framed with your success and sketched on your own terms. Time flies by, but being true to yourself is a journey worth sticking through, no matter the hurdles and failures that arise. And all the while, that failure is probably dressed up fancy dress as opportunity in disguise. So chin up and focus full beam and draw that dream and bring it into being. In 2019, I'm lifting off the veil of my own New Year's resolutions. And actually, I'm abandoning the entire thing. For this year, I'm giving up on making January promises that end by March. So instead, I'm going ahead full steam, marching towards making 2019 the year of habits and not goals. I leave it to Messi and Ronaldo to figure out who's the greatest of them all. For greatness isn't an act, but an action repeated again and again until the walls fall down, brick by brick, day by day. So in 2019, I made it my way to start my day by catching the 5:40 a.m. train to make it in time for the Muslim prayer said before dawn is nigh. For if we want to be the change we wish to see, I'll start by connecting to the source of all divinity and then proceed to build habits that start with loving more. In fact, excessively, because love doesn't hold a numerical value or a visa time limit entry. So to the heartbreaks and scars of yesterday, thanks for all the memories and shattered glass, but I'm off to rebuild a heart that might once again be whole and ready to love anew. And to gratitude, I know we haven't spent much time of late, but my ummi told me it's never too late to extend a thanks for what we already have, yet don't appreciate. So a habit to smile is what I'll inculcate, especially when the seas are playing havoc and the only part I wish to endure is the end of it all. And as I wrap this piece up on the first Friday of the first month, and before this year flies by, may it be a year where we all grow in time and cherish the greatest value afforded to us all of being present, living today and knowing that the gift that is life is your story to write. So let it blossom with all its imperfections and truths, and be a picture any frame would dream of being able to hold up, no matter which way it's viewed.
Ghalib Loan there on the BBC Asia Network. Thank you so much for that wonderful piece. I think that's something we can all take away with us for the rest of the year. Thank you ever so much.